They're not the ones giving speeches. They're not the ones posing on magazine covers. And they're never the ones trending on social media. The truth. The people who truly run the world don't want to be seen because visibility is a trap. The applause you chase today becomes the weapon used against you tomorrow. And the man who craves the spotlight, who needs to be known, becomes a slave to the crowd's approval. Real power doesn't need that. Real power prefers the shadows. It's easy to assume that leaders, celebrities, and public figures hold the reins of influence. They seem powerful because they are visible. But visibility is often mistaken for control. A CEO on stage can be fired. A president in the spotlight can be impeached. But the strategist who wrote the policy, the silent partner who funds the machine, they remain untouched, insulated, hidden. And that's exactly how they like it. This is the first and most uncomfortable truth about power. The face you see is rarely the hand that moves the strings. The real force behind decisions, empires, and systems is often nameless, and that anonymity is their greatest weapon. If you can't be seen, you can't be targeted. If you can't be named, you can't be blamed. There's something terrifyingly beautiful about that level of control, the kind that whispers instead of shouts, the kind that doesn't command the room but rearranges it silently before anyone enters. This is power at its purest form, invisible, unprovable, and absolute. People crave transparency because they want someone to praise or to blame, but the master gives them neither. He stays absent, and in that absence, people begin to project. They imagine his influence everywhere. They see his hand in every move, and the myth becomes more powerful than the man ever could be. So look around. The person who speaks the loudest isn't always the one in charge. Often the one with the most control is the one who never speaks at all, because silence, when used correctly, does not signify weakness. It signifies mastery. The most dangerous figure in the room is the one who isn't in the room. He never wore a crown. He never claimed to be king. But for nearly half a century, Cosimo de' Medici ruled Florence with a grip tighter than any monarch. To the public, he was just a banker, a wealthy citizen who funded cathedrals and offered quiet advice to politicians. But behind the elegant robes and humble posture stood one of history's greatest masters of invisible power. Cosimo understood something most rulers never learn, that to truly control a system, you must never appear to dominate it. He funded elections without running in them. He installed leaders without becoming one. His fortune financed wars, shaped alliances, and silenced enemies, all while keeping his name off the front lines. And because he remained in the background, he could not be blamed. When policies failed, it was the officials who took the fall. When decisions angered the people, it was the faces on stage who were attacked. But Cosimo, he stayed insulated, the architect behind the curtain, untouched by the flames he sometimes lit. There was brilliance in this restraint. Florence was a city of rival factions, where envy destroyed faster than weapons. Any man who rose too fast, shined too bright, was quickly pulled down. But Cosimo rose slowly and silently, building loyalty. Not with charisma, but with gold. He didn't demand allegiance. He made himself essential. Artists, merchants, politicians, they all depended on him. And in that dependency, he found his leverage. More than 500 years later, his strategy still echoes. In a world obsessed with recognition, Cosimo de' Medici chose relevance over fame. He didn't need applause because he had influence, and influence, unlike popularity, cannot be voted away. His legacy reminds us that sometimes the greatest strength lies in knowing when not to speak, when not to appear, when not to take credit. Because when you give others the illusion of control, you are free to hold the real control quietly, permanently. So remember this: titles fade, but structure endures. The man behind the throne, the one who shapes the rules, not plays by them, that's the one who truly rules. And Cosimo, he never needed a crown. He built the system that decided who wore one. You won't find them on magazine covers, you won't see their names trending, and yet they shape your world more than any president, celebrity, or CEO ever could. In today's age of noise, 24-hour news cycles, influencer culture, and political theater, we've mistaken visibility for control. But the real architects of power operate in silence. They don't run for office. They fund the campaigns. They don't go viral. They own the platforms. They don't debate on camera. They decide which voices are amplified and which are silenced. Think of the election strategist who never stands on a podium but engineers the speech that moves millions. The billionaire investor who reshapes entire industries with a single phone call, never once appearing in a press conference. The think tank advisor who ghostwrites policy that changes your life, yet remains anonymous. These are not public figures. They are power figures, and their strength lies in precisely that distinction. You see, visibility has become a kind of trap. Those in the spotlight are dissected, criticized, and constantly watched. One mistake, one offhand comment, and their credibility is gone. But those behind the scenes, they're free. Free to experiment, free to shift positions, free to influence without scrutiny. They are not bound by image, and so they are not bound by consequence. They understand a fundamental truth: when you control the environment, you don't need to control the people directly. Control the media narrative and public opinion follows. Fund the right research and policy bends. Back the right candidate and history is rewritten without your name ever being attached to the outcome. This is not conspiracy, it's structure, it's strategy. The power players of the modern world don't need validation because they own the levers of influence. They don't demand attention, they direct it. And that makes them far more dangerous than those in the public eye. Because the ones you can't name can't be blamed. So next time you hear a headline, watch a speech, or witness a public scandal, ask yourself who benefits, and more importantly, who stays silent. Because silence in the modern world is not weakness, it's dominance. Machiavelli never trusted the crowd, not because they were evil, but because they were unpredictable. In The Prince, he warns rulers of a seductive trap: visibility. To be seen, to be adored, to be celebrated, it feeds the ego, but starves the strategy. Because the moment you step into the light, you become legible, trackable, vulnerable. And the very crowd that once cheered your name will eventually demand your downfall the moment you fail to entertain them. A visible ruler may gain love, but with that love comes expectation. And when expectations aren't met, even slightly, praise turns to suspicion. Suspicion becomes resentment, and resentment becomes rebellion. History is littered with the bodies of leaders who believed the applause meant security. Julius Caesar was adored. Until he wasn't, Marie Antoinette bathed in spectacle, until the blade fell. Machiavelli understood the psychology of the masses far better than most of today's leaders do. He saw that people are loyal not to principles, but to performance. They do not worship authority, they worship novelty. And when the performance grows stale, they replace the actor. That's why true power cannot depend on the crowd's affection. Because affection is the currency of entertainers, not emperors. Invisibility to Machiavelli was not weakness. It was armor. The more a prince exposed himself, the more he invited attack. Every speech, every interview, every public gesture is a thread the enemy can pull. The more you speak, the more your motives can be interpreted. The more you show your face, the more they believe they understand you. And once they believe they understand you, they believe they can defeat you. He advised rulers to use proxies, visible lieutenants to absorb praise and punishment. Let them take the stage. Let them handle the riots. Let them shake the hands, give the speeches, take the risks. Because in doing so, they also take the blame. And when they fall, the real ruler survives intact, unscathed, and ready to pivot. The brilliance of this approach lies in its emotional detachment. Machiavelli doesn't ask leaders to be loved. He doesn't ask them to win the hearts of the people. He asks them to survive, and survival in a volatile world demands insulation. It demands that you understand visibility for what it truly is, a liability dressed as a gift. Today's leaders often make the fatal mistake of chasing attention, tweeting their thoughts, posting daily, exposing their private lives in an attempt to appear relatable. But with every word they share, they lose mystery. With every picture they post, they reveal vulnerabilities. They become familiar. And familiarity in the court of public opinion breeds contempt. Machiavelli's Prince would never have gone viral. He would have been the one who funded the network behind the scenes. He would have been the one pulling the strings, while others danced in the spotlight. Because the more they watch your proxies, the less they see you. And the less they see you, the safer you are. So if you seek to lead not just momentarily, but enduringly, resist the urge to be known. Be respected, not recognized. Be feared, not followed. And above all, be felt, not seen. The crowd will always look for a face to praise and a face to blame. Give them neither. Power isn't always about making moves in front of the world. Sometimes the greatest move is never being seen. Making one. This is the art of the hidden strategist. The ruler who never appears to rule the mind behind the movement. The architect behind the empire. While the world watches actors on stage applauding their speeches and reacting to their mistakes, the true master remains cloaked, insulated from consequence, and entirely in control. He doesn't need to appear, he only needs to orchestrate. Machiavelli understood this on a visceral level. He observed that the strongest leaders weren't the ones who stood at the front of armies or declared themselves gods among men. They were the ones who moved through systems like ghosts, unseen but felt. They embedded their will in laws, rituals, institutions, and structures that outlived any speech or slogan. Why? Because visibility fades, systems endure. The hidden master doesn't seek fame. He seeks influence, and influence, unlike recognition, leaves no fingerprints. His brilliance lies in delegation, not of responsibility, but of exposure. He selects figureheads carefully. They are shields, not equals. They absorb light so that he can remain in the dark, and in the dark, he becomes untouchable. Think of it like chess. The visible ruler is the king, slow, vulnerable, always under threat. The strategist is the player guiding every piece with silent precision, never once stepping onto the board. When the opponent thinks they're targeting power, they're only striking symbols. The real force is elsewhere, watching, adjusting, preparing the next sacrifice. And this isn't just a strategy for survival. It's a strategy for dominance. When you're not seen, your enemies can't predict your next move. When you're not known, your image becomes whatever they fear most. People begin to imagine you as larger, more cunning, more ruthless than you really are, and those projections become part of your power. The hidden ruler doesn't shout. He whispers into the right ears. He doesn't argue in public. He shapes the rules of the debate. He doesn't fight battles. He decides when and where the war will happen and who will take the fall. Every piece on the board thinks it's moving by its own will, never realizing the design was pre-written. This distance also gives him freedom. He can change strategies, abandon allies, reverse decisions, all without losing face, because he never showed his face to begin with. The visible leader must explain every pivot. The strategist explains nothing. He adapts in silence. The world often romanticizes charisma, the passionate speech, the bold presence, the magnetic personality. But Machiavellian minds know better. Charisma draws fire. Charisma invites obsession and analysis. The more they understand you, the easier it is to destroy you. But the hidden figure, he's not a target. He's the one placing them. This strategy isn't just for empires. It applies to any arena business. Politics, even relationships. The one who controls outcomes without needing recognition holds the deepest leverage. While others fight for visibility, the master designs the frame in which their battles happen. And here's the final truth. The man in front may win the applause, but it's the man behind who writes the script. So stay quiet, stay calculating. Let others chase the crown. You design the throne. Absence is not a void. It is a canvas. And on that blank space, people paint their fears, their fantasies, their projections. This is the mystique of power, not built through constant presence, but through carefully measured distance. The less they see you, the more they imagine you. And when imagination takes hold, reality is no longer the limit. It's surpassed. That's when influence becomes legend. Machiavelli understood this psychological alchemy. When a ruler withdraws, he doesn't vanish, he expands in the minds of others. The silence becomes suspicious. The delay becomes calculated. The unknown becomes dangerous. When you're not there to be measured, people exaggerate, and in the absence of facts, they fill the void with myth. This is not accidental. It is deliberate strategy. By staying away, you allow others to construct a version of you that is bigger than truth. A whisper in the hallway becomes a rumor in the city. A decision made in private becomes in the public eye an act of genius or cruelty, even if you did nothing at all. Because absence forces people to speculate, and speculation is fuel for fear, for admiration, for control. In visibility, you become finite, familiar, understandable. But in absence, you become infinite, a symbol. You stop being a man or woman and become a force, a presence that haunts boardrooms, war rooms, negotiations. People begin asking, what would he do even when you're not in the room? And when your name alone alters the course of conversations you have already won. That is the secret. The myth is often stronger than the man. Legends terrify more than armies. Consider the examples from history. Genghis Khan's enemies often surrendered before the battle even began, not because they saw him, but because they heard stories of brutality, cunning, and unstoppable conquest. His absence became a psychological weapon. In modern times, the effect remains. A silent investor whose name is whispered in financial circles can move markets just by suggestion. A strategist who never speaks publicly can change the course of a campaign, simply by being rumored to support one side. When people don't know your limits, they assume you have none, and that assumption gives you leverage. No press release ever could. But mystique doesn't come from laziness, it comes from discipline. It is the result of carefully choosing when to appear, what to reveal, and most importantly, when to say nothing at all. Every time you speak, you give away a piece of the mystery. Every photo, every quote, every unnecessary appearance chips away at your myth, and soon you're not a force. You're just another face in the crowd, known, measured, categorized, and therefore defeatable. The powerful understand that scarcity creates value. Diamonds are valuable because they're rare. Your presence should be no different. When you appear too often, people stop listening, but when you rarely step forward, when your voice is reserved for only the most decisive moments, every word becomes heavy. Every gesture feels deliberate. The world leans in, not because you shout, but because you've trained them to expect meaning in your silence. There's a spiritual dimension to this as well. The more visible you are, the more reactive you become. You're constantly adjusting to how others perceive you. But when you withdraw, when you observe in silence, you begin to shape perception itself. You're no longer part of the noise. You become the echo that shapes the room. And that's the paradox. The less you do, the more they believe you can do anything. The less you show, the more they think you know everything. The less you speak, the more they listen when you finally do. So cultivate your myth. Starve them of your presence. Make your silence louder than their noise. And when they speak of you, because they will let their imagination work in your favor, let them create the legend that serves your strategy. Because sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is disappear. Absence is not weakness, it's not hesitation, and it's definitely not fear. In the hands of a Machiavellian mind, absence becomes a weapon. Sharp, cold, and precise. It is not the escape of the timid, but the strategy of the master tactician, who understands a brutal truth. Power is not seized through noise, but preserved through stillness. And while the world mistakes presence for strength, the one who dominates in silence shapes everything while risking nothing. Absence is not retreat, it's preparation. Every moment a true strategist remains hidden is not wasted. It's invested like a blade being sharpened in the dark. He studies, recalibrates, and watches the game unfold while others burn themselves out, chasing influence. The master waits for the moment when one move will outweigh 1,000 words. He is not behind, he is above. Invisibility protects the most precious asset of all, unpredictability. When you are absent, no one knows what you're thinking, what you're planning, or what your limits are. That uncertainty multiplies your power. People cannot defend against what they cannot see. They begin to second-guess, hesitate, overcorrect, and that hesitation becomes your leverage. Meanwhile, you conserve energy, You avoid scandals, public errors, and reputational erosion. You are never caught reacting because you never allowed yourself to be pulled into the spotlight in the first place. And the less you respond, the more others reveal. They show their insecurities. They talk too much. They guess, hoping to get ahead of you. But the beauty is, you're already ahead. Precisely because you said nothing. This is why in every structure of power, from government to business to warfare, the true leaders build layers between themselves and the world. They use proxies to absorb attention and blame. They use spokespersons, executives, generals, and frontmen to act on their behalf. Each layer serves as both a shield and a signal. I do not lower myself to be seen, and that very distance becomes power in itself. The Machiavellian thinker doesn't chase the stage. He builds the theater. He doesn't beg for applause. He selects who the crowd will clap for and when. This detachment is not lack of passion, but a superior form of control. He operates on long timelines, not short-term validation. He doesn't need to be right today, so long as he owns the outcome tomorrow. Look at the corporate world. The CEO may take the interview, but the majority shareholder, the silent board member, is the one who decides whether that CEO stays or goes. In politics, the elected official reads the teleprompter, but the strategist who wrote the speech remains behind the curtain, far from the heat. When things go wrong, it's the public face who pays the price, but the architect survives and adapts. This strategy works across generations because it aligns with one of the oldest truths of power. The one who holds control must never hold exposure. Visibility creates accountability, and accountability limits flexibility. But absence creates freedom to pivot, to disown, to redirect without consequence. And more than anything, absence is a declaration. I do not need to be seen to be felt. In a world addicted to noise, that kind of silence is terrifying. It implies confidence, certainty, calculation. It unsettles your enemies because they don't know what you're planning, or if you're planning at all, they waste their time preparing for attacks that may never come. And when you finally strike, it's surgical. So don't confuse quiet with surrender. Don't mistake withdrawal for loss. The ones who make the most noise are usually the ones with the least control. But the ones who vanish, who move without being noticed, they are the ones designing outcomes that last decades, because the real master doesn't show up to every fight. He shows up only when the fight is already over and he's already won. In a culture that rewards visibility, applause, and constant engagement, the idea that power grows in silence feels counterintuitive, even rebellious. But that's exactly why it works. The world is full of people trying to be seen, heard, and celebrated. Very few understand the value of not being noticed, and even fewer know how to use it as a weapon. Here's the truth. You don't need to be loud to be powerful. In fact, the more others can read you, the easier you are to control. Every time you over-explain, overshare, or overexpose yourself, you give others a blueprint to manipulate you. But when you step back, when you say less, when you move with discipline instead of impulse, you become unpredictable. And in that unpredictability, you become dangerous. Absence, when used with intention, isn't weakness, it's strategy, it's emotional discipline. It's the ability to let others wonder what you're thinking, what you're planning, and what you're capable of without ever giving them certainty. People don't fear what they understand, they fear what they can't pin down. And in that fear, you gain control. This doesn't mean becoming cold or antisocial. It means recognizing that your energy, your presence, your voice, they're all forms of currency. Spend them wisely. Don't hand your power to every room you enter, every conflict you face, or every person who demands your attention. You don't owe the world your constant availability. You owe yourself your clarity. Apply this in your relationships, in your career, in your personal decisions. Let others speak first. Let them reveal themselves. Stay quiet long enough and people will show you who they are, their fears, their ego, their flaws. While they're trying to impress or intimidate, you'll be calculating. And when it's time to move, you'll move with precision, not noise. Remember this, the lion doesn't roar before the hunt. He waits, watches, then strikes. In a world obsessed with attention, your absence will speak volumes. Be felt, not seen. Be known, but never fully understood. And let silence be your sharpest edge.